The alarm came at 3 in the morning. The sound cut through the outpost like a knife. The emergency siren that no one had heard in 2 years. Kaltara woke in her quarters and knew immediately that something was wrong. Something was very wrong. The hostile faction came from the eastern territories. They were called the Krell, a species that had made it clear they wanted the human outpost destroyed. For months, there had been warnings and intelligence reports. But warnings were not the same as reality. Warnings were far away. They did not tear holes in your walls. Kaltara heard the explosions as she rushed through the corridors of the outpost. The wall shook. Dust fell from the ceiling. Humans were running everywhere, moving with the controlled panic of soldiers who had trained for this moment. She went to the supply center. That was where she needed to be. That was where resources and information came together. The center was already filling with officers trying to coordinate the defense. The damage reports were coming in fast, and they were bad. "The eastern wall is breached," someone shouted. "We have inbound fighters at 270 degrees. Get the medical supplies into the reinforced bunker." Another voice called out. Marcus was at the center of it all, his voice steady and controlled. He was not a man who panicked. He was a man who adapted. He looked at Kaltara when she arrived, and something passed between them. Understanding. They both knew how bad this was. "The defensive systems are failing," Marcus said to her. Not a question, but a statement. Kaltara looked at the data coming through their communication system. The Krell attack pattern was familiar. It was too familiar. She had grown up on Zereth watching military formations, even if she had been excluded from service. She knew her people's tactics. And the Krell, though different from Zerthians, use similar principles. "They are not attacking randomly," Kaltara said, her 4 hands working across multiple screens at once. This was one advantage of her biology that she had never been allowed to use in Zerthian society. 4 arms meant 4 times the information she could process. They are following a formation pattern. The Krell use 3-point attack sequences. They soften defenses at one location, then strike hard at a second, then attack the third when defenders are divided. Marcus leaned forward. "Where's the third target?" Kaltara traced the pattern. The explosions at the eastern wall. The pressure on the landing zone to the south. That meant the third attack would come from the northern section, where the power generators were located. The generators were the heart of the entire outpost. "North," she said. "They will attack the north sector next. Not where you are strong, but where you are not looking." Marcus did not hesitate. He did not question her. He trusted her because she had earned that trust over the past months, one good decision at a time. "I am moving defensive units north," he said into the communication system. Now, the soldiers moved. They were scared. Kaltara could see that. Humans showed fear different from Zerthians. Their skin changed color. Their breathing became rapid. Their movements became jerky. But they moved, and they did it fast. The Krell struck the north sector 15 minutes later. The Zerthian female had been correct. The human defenders were ready. They met the Krell attackers head-on and pushed them back. The attack failed, but the fighting was not over. The Krell were more aggressive now, seeing that the outpost was holding. They pressed their advantage where they could, trying to break through the weakened areas. The eastern wall continued to fall apart. Humans died there. Kaltara heard about it over the communication system and felt something cold inside her. These were people she worked with. People who had treated her with kindness. And then Marcus went to the eastern wall himself. "Sir, we need you here at Command Center," someone said over the radio. "I need to see the situation," Marcus replied. "I need to know what we are dealing with." Kaltara wanted to tell him to stay where it was safe, but she said nothing. This was what leaders did. They went to the places where their people were dying. The Krell came in a wave through a hole in the wall. They were faster than Zerthians, built for combat in ways that were efficient and brutal. The human soldiers fought them with guns and explosives and improvisation, using the narrow corridors and corners of the outpost to their advantage. That was when Kaltara saw Marcus on her screen. He was moving through the eastern section, guiding units, directing fire. A Krell fire broke through the human line and moved toward a group of soldiers pinned behind debris. Marcus saw it. Without any hesitation, without calculating the risk, he moved between the Krell and the soldiers. Kaltara watched as the Krell struck Marcus. She watched as his body was thrown backward by the force of the blow. She watched as blood came from his shoulder and his side. Something happened inside her then. Something that Zerthian females were not supposed to feel. Anger. Real, burning anger that came from deep inside her. She did what no Zerthian outcast was supposed to do. She left her station. She ran through the corridors of the outpost, her four legs moving fast toward the medical bay. The injury looked bad. The bleeding would not stop. The Krell had claws, and the claws had done damage. But Marcus was still conscious. He still moved. He still fought, even wounded, until reinforcements came and the eastern section was secured. The Krell pulled back. They had lost too many fighters. The outpost had held. When Marcus finally came to the medical bay, and the human doctors began to work on his wounds, Kaltara stood beside his medical pod. She did not leave. Not when the doctors asked her to. Not when other humans gave her looks of confusion. Not when night came and the outpost grew quiet. The fighting had stopped. The outpost had survived. Marcus woke slowly, the medication making his eyes unfocused. When he saw Kaltara standing there in the blue light of the medical bay, something changed in his expression. His hand moved across the edge of the medical pod, reaching toward her. "You stayed," he said. His voice was weak but clear. "You were injured because you protected others," Kaltara said. "Because you are the kind of leader who puts himself in danger for his people. That is worth staying for." Marcus smiled, and even in pain, the smile was real. "I protected you too, you know? You are part of this outpost. You matter here." Those words settled into Kaltara like roots growing into soil. She had been rejected by her entire species. She had been told she was worthless. But this human, wounded and bleeding, saw her value. He saw it clearly enough to protect her life at the cost of his own blood. Kaltara reached out with one of her hands and touched his hand gently. Neither of them moved. In the silence of the medical bay, surrounded by the sounds of machines and the breathing of a man who had chosen her worth, Kaltara understood something fundamental. She was not where she belonged in her world, but she might be exactly where she belonged in this one. Kaltara stood in the judgment chamber, her forearms hanging at her sides. The Council of Zereth sat above her on their elevated platform, their skin glowing with the bioluminescence that showed their status and breeding potential. Her own skin was darker, duller. That was the problem. The lead judge, a male named Vareth, did not look at her as he spoke. His words came down like a hammer on stone. She was barren. Her genetic code had been tested, analyzed, and rejected. Among the Zerthian people, a female who could not produce offspring had no value. This was not cruelty. This was simply the way their civilization had always worked. "You will be transferred," Vareth said. His voice carried no emotion. "The human outpost on the border requires a logistics coordinator. You will serve there." Kaltara's secondary heart sank. The human outpost. The place where Zerthians went to avoid the disgrace of execution. The place where the worthless went to be forgotten. She did not argue. No Zerthian female argued with the council. She simply bowed and left the chamber, her forearms crossed against her body in the gesture of submission. The transport ship took her across the purple sky of Zereth toward the distant human settlement. Kaltara watched her world disappear behind her. The great cities with their gleaming towers, the breeding grounds where females competed for the honor of carrying eggs, the libraries where knowledge was kept and protected. None of it was for her anymore. The human outpost appeared below like a scar on the landscape. It was smaller than she expected, built in a practical way with none of the beauty of Xertian architecture. Boxes made of metal and stone, connected by bridges and walkways. This was where humans lived. This was now where she would live. Captain Marcus Hayes was waiting for her when she arrived. He was tall for a human, with dark skin and eyes that looked directly at her without the contempt she expected. Most humans avoided looking at Xertians. They either feared them or found them strange. Marcus simply looked at her like she was a person. "Kaltara, right?" he said, reading from a document. "Welcome to the outpost. I'm Captain Hayes. You'll be working in supply and logistics. We need someone who understands Xertian protocols, and you come highly recommended from the council." Highly recommended was a lie, and they both knew it. The council had recommended her because they wanted her gone. But Marcus said it in a way that did not feel like mockery. He said it like it might actually be true. The first weeks were strange. Kaltara arrived at the logistics center and began to understand the human supply system. It was inefficient compared to Xertian methods, but it worked in a different way. Humans were creative. They found solutions that no one had thought of before. They improvised when something broke instead of waiting for a replacement. It was chaotic, but it was also alive. She made suggestions. The first few were ignored by the human officers. But Marcus listened. He came to her workstation one morning and asked why she had reorganized the medical supplies in an unusual way. "The rotation you had before was logical," she explained. "But the medical team moves through that section 3 times more than supply needs. The new organization reduces their walking by half. It saves time. It saves energy." Marcus nodded slowly. Then he smiled. It was a strange expression, but it seemed genuine. "That's good thinking," he said. "Let's implement it." The other humans began to notice. When Kaltara suggested improvements to the food storage system, they were tested. When she pointed out a flaw in their communication protocols, the problem was fixed. Slowly, without anyone announcing it, her opinions began to matter. She still felt the weight of what she was. Every mirror showed her the dull coloring of her skin, the mark of her inferiority. The other Xertians who passed through the outpost looked at her with pity and disgust. She had failed at the only thing that mattered. She was a broken thing that should have been removed from existence. But in the human outpost, something different happened. No one asked about her breeding status. No one seemed to care. The humans worked alongside her, trusted her with important tasks, and defended her ideas in meetings. It was like living in a different reality, one where her worth was measured by different standards. One evening, Marcus found her working late in the supply center. The outpost was quiet, the other humans asleep in their quarters. He had a cup of hot liquid that humans called coffee. "You work too hard," he said, offering her the cup. Kaltara did not drink coffee, but she took it anyway. The cup was warm in her hands. "There is much to do," she said. "Yes," Marcus agreed. "But there's always much to do. My people learn early that we cannot do everything. We have to choose what matters most." "What matters most?" Kaltara asked. Marcus looked at her for a long moment. "The people you work with. The ones who make the work possible. The ones who make it worth doing." He left her with the coffee and walked back to his quarters. Kaltara sat in the silence of the supply center, holding the warm cup. For the first time since she had arrived at the outpost, she thought about something dangerous. Maybe what the Xertian Council had told her was wrong. Maybe her value was not measured by what she could produce. Maybe it could be measured by what she could do. by what she could think, by what she could offer to the world around her. The thought was so new, so strange, that it almost frightened her. Her entire life had been built on the understanding that she was worthless. And now a human captain in a small outpost was suggesting something different. Keltara looked down at the coffee in her hands. She took a small sip. It was bitter and hot and unlike anything she had ever tasted. But it was also comforting. It was warm. It was real. Outside the windows of the supply center, the stars of Zereth's sky began to shine. Keltara sat in the darkness, holding her warm cup, and allowed herself to imagine a different future. Not one where she returned home in triumph. Not one where the council finally recognized her worth. But one where she did not need their recognition at all. One where she could simply be. And perhaps that was enough. 3 weeks after the attack, Marcus walked out of the medical bay. His left arm was in a support sling, and he moved slowly, but he was moving. The human doctors said he would make a full recovery. The Krell claws had been deep, but not deep enough to take him away. Keltara was in the supply center when he came to find her. He looked for her first, which told her something important. Before the attack, she had been someone he worked with. After the attack, she had become someone he looked for. "Walk with me," he said. They went to the observation deck on the highest level of the outpost. From there, they could see across the Zerthium landscape. The purple sky. The distant towers of Zereth. The world that had rejected her. The world that was no longer hers. "I have been thinking," Marcus said, "about what you told me during the attack. About what you did. About how you stayed with me." Keltara did not know what he was going to say, but she felt afraid. Not the fear of the attack, but a different fear. The fear of wanting something badly and knowing it could be taken away. "I want to ask you something," Marcus continued. "And I want you to understand that you can say no. That you have a choice here. That matters to me. What is it?" Keltara asked. Marcus took a breath. The pain from his injury showed on his face, but he pushed through it. In human culture, we have something called partnership. It is different from anything Zerthians have. It is not about breeding or status or producing offspring. It is about two people choosing each other. Choosing to be together. Choosing to face the world together. I am asking if you would choose that with me. If you would be my partner. Keltara did not understand at first. The concept was too foreign to her. Partnership among humans was strange and illogical by Zerthian standards. But she was starting to understand that Zerthian standards had been wrong about a lot of things. "What does partnership mean?" she asked. "It means I stand with you," Marcus said. "And you stand with me. It means we face what comes next as a unit. It means I value you. Not because of what you can produce. Not because of your status. But because of who you are. Because when I am with you, I am better than I am alone." Keltara felt something moving in her chest. Something that had been broken was beginning to heal. Something that had been told it was worthless was beginning to believe it might have value after all. "I choose you," she said. Marcus smiled. The pain in his face eased slightly. He reached out with his good arm and touched her shoulder. For a human, this was a casual gesture. For Keltara, who had never been touched with affection by anyone in her adult life, it meant everything. The next day, Marcus went to the command center and filed the paperwork. He filed it in the human military database, making it official. Keltara was listed as his partner. It was a legal status. It meant something. But the real problem came when the Zerthian government found out. The delegation ship arrived within a week. 6 Zerthian officials, including a judge named Soren, descended from their vessel to meet with Marcus and Keltara. Soren was the type of male who glowed with status. His skin was bright with bioluminescence that showed centuries of breeding privilege. The meeting took place in the conference room of the human outpost. Marcus sat beside Kaltara, his arm no longer in a sling but clearly still healing. Soren sat across from them, his forearms folded on the table. "This partnership registration is unacceptable," Soren said, without any greeting or courtesy. "Kaltara is Zerthian. She is the property of Zirath. The human has no right to claim partnership with her." "She is not property," Marcus said calmly. "She is a person. She has chosen partnership with me of her own will. That is what matters." Soren's skin flickered with anger, colors moving across his surface that showed his rage. "She is barren. She has no value. By taking her, you are reducing your own standing. You are choosing contamination." "I am choosing someone I value," Marcus replied. "Someone who is smart, brave, and loyal. Someone who has shown more courage than most soldiers I have known. That is not contamination. That is strength." The other Zerthians looked away from Kaltara, as if being near her was unpleasant. This was the reality of her society. This was what they thought of her. "There is a final option," Soren said. "Kaltara can return to Zirath. If she does this, the government will overlook this indiscretion. She will be reassigned, and her career can continue in some way." Kaltara had not said anything yet. She had been listening, watching, understanding. She knew what returning meant. It meant returning to a world that had rejected her. It meant going back to the daily crushing weight of being told she was worthless. It meant giving up Marcus and the possibility of being valued for who she was. She stood up. All four of her hands moved to the table in front of her. "I will not return," she said. Her voice was steady. "I reject Zirath. I reject the values of my people that measure a female's worth by her ability to breed. I reject the council that told me I was nothing because my genetic code did not match their expectations. I choose Marcus. I choose this outpost. I choose a future where I am valued for who I am, not condemned for what I cannot produce." The words hung in the air. They were the most powerful words Kaltara had ever spoken. Soren stood up, his skin flashing with red and purple that showed fury. "Then you are exiled. You are no longer Zerthian. You are no longer welcome on our world. Your name is struck from our records. You are dead to your people." He turned and walked out of the conference room. The other Zerthians followed. Within an hour, their ship lifted off and returned to Zirath. Kaltara felt the weight of what she had done. She would never go home. She would never walk the streets of her childhood. She would never see the places she had known. All of that was gone. But when Marcus stood beside her and took her hand in his, Kaltara understood something. Home was not a place. Home was a person who chose you. Home was somewhere you were wanted. Home was where you could be yourself without apology. That night, in the quarters that she and Marcus now shared, Kaltara looked out at the purple sky of Zirath one more time. She thought about the female she had been, the broken thing that society had tried to discard. That female was gone. In her place was someone new. Someone who had chosen her own path. Someone who was loved not for what she could produce, but for who she was. Someone who had found value in a place she never expected to find it. Kaltara reached out and placed her hand on the window. The glass was cool against her skin. Behind her, Marcus slept in the darkness of their quarters, healing from his wounds, at peace, knowing that she had chosen to stay. For the first time in her life, Kaltara felt something that Zerthian society had told her was impossible. She felt hope. She felt belonging. She felt home. 8 months had passed since the Zerthian delegation left the outpost. The world continued on. The outpost was repaired. New supplies came in. Soldiers trained and worked and lived their lives. But something was changing inside Kaltara. Something was moving. Something was growing. At first, she did not understand it. Her body felt different, heavier, stronger in some ways, vulnerable in others. She went to the human medical team and asked them to run tests. The human doctor, a woman named Sarah, spent 2 days reviewing the results. Her expression was confused, then shocked, then amazed. "You are pregnant," Sarah said finally. Kaltara felt the weight of those words. Pregnant. It was supposed to be impossible. Her genetics, the Zerthian Council had said, were broken. She could not produce life. Her body was defective. That was the entire reason she had been cast out. "But I am barren," Kaltara said. "The council tested me. Many times. They said my body could not create offspring." Sarah nodded slowly. "Your body cannot create offspring the way Zerthian females normally do. That much is probably true. But you can create offspring with Marcus. The combination of human and Zerthian biology creates something new. Something that the Zerthian genetic tests were not looking for because they did not believe it was possible." The irony was so heavy that it almost crushed her. She had been cast out for being barren. She had been rejected, exiled, told she had no value. And the thing they said made her worthless was actually not what they thought it was. Her genetics were not broken. They were simply different. They were different in a way that only became possible with a human partner. Kaltara told Marcus that night. She watched his face as the information moved through him. First surprise, then joy, then fear, then acceptance. Humans felt many things at once. It was one of the reasons she loved them. "We are going to have a child," Marcus said slowly. "Our child. Part Zerthian, part human. Something new." "I have brought shame," Kaltara said quietly. "To you and to your people. An alien female carrying a human officer's child. This is not what your society expects." Marcus stood up and took all 4 of her hands in his 2 hands. It was a gesture he had learned, using both his hands to hold both her upper hands, then both her lower hands. It was his way of saying he held all of her. "You brought strength," he said. "You brought change. You brought something that the Council on Zereth never expected. They were so certain about what you could and could not do. And they were wrong." The pregnancy progressed. Kaltara's body changed. She became larger, stronger. The human and Zerthian biology combined in unexpected ways. The human doctors were fascinated. They had never seen a hybrid pregnancy before. None of them knew what the child would look like. None of them knew if it would be healthy. But they worked carefully, and they supported Kaltara through every change. The soldiers at the outpost began to understand what was happening. A Zerthian female who had been rejected by her own people was carrying a child that had never existed before. A hybrid child. A child that represented something new in the galaxy. The Zerthian government found out through their intelligence networks. The news reached Zereth, and the response was immediate and complicated. The council was torn. On one hand, they wanted nothing to do with Kaltara. She was exiled. She was dead to them. On the other hand, she was carrying a child that was half Zerthian. A child that would exist whether they acknowledged it or not. News also traveled to Earth. Humans read about Kaltara's story. A female from an alien world, rejected by her own species for supposed infertility, carrying a child that proved the rejections wrong. The story moved people. It made them think about worth and value and the way societies decided who was expendable and who was precious. Letters began to arrive at the outpost. Humans from Earth telling Kaltara that they were proud of her, that they supported her choice, that they wanted to know about the child when it was born. In the 6th month, Kaltara felt the child moving inside her. Life, new life. A being that had never existed before. She placed her hands on her swollen belly and felt the movements. This was something she was supposed to be incapable of. This was something her own people had said was impossible. Marcus sat beside her in the evenings, his hand on her belly, feeling the child that was his. They did not know if the baby would be male or female. They did not know if it would favor Zerthian biology or human biology. They did not know what it would look like, what it would be, but they knew it was theirs. And they knew it was wanted. That was the thing that mattered. The child was wanted, completely and without reservation. In the 8th month, Kaltara received a message from Zerath. It came from an official council member, but it was different from what had come before. It was not hostile. It was almost curious. "We wish to understand," the message said. "We wish to know about the child. We wish to know if our fears are correct, if our science was wrong." Kaltara did not know how to respond. She did not know if she wanted to respond. Zerath had thrown her away. Zerath had told her she was nothing. And now Zerath wanted to know about the child. But Marcus had a different view. "Let them wonder," he said. "Let them have to confront the fact that they were wrong about you. That they were wrong about your worth. That they were wrong about what you could do." As the due date approached, Kaltara grew stronger and more certain. She had been told she was broken. She had been told she was worthless. She had been told she was incapable of creating life. All of it was wrong. And she was about to prove it in the most undeniable way possible. The child inside her kicked, and Kaltara felt the future moving. A new life. A new possibility. A new answer to all the questions that Zerath had asked about her worth. She was not broken. She was different. And different was not the same as less. Different was not the same as worthless. Different was not the same as expendable. Different was the beginning of everything new. The labor started on a morning when Zerath's sky was clear and purple. Kaltara felt the contractions begin, and she knew that everything was about to change. Marcus took her to the medical bay, where Sarah and her team were waiting. The delivery was not easy. Hybrid biology meant complications that no one had predicted. The child was larger than a human baby, but smaller than a Zerthian infant. The four-armed genetics of Kaltara, combined with the two-armed genetics of Marcus, created something that had to find its own path. For hours, Kaltara labored, her body working, straining, pushing. Marcus stayed beside her the entire time. He held her hands. He whispered words that he had learned in the Zerthian language, words that meant strength and love and courage. He was there, fully present, as their child fought to enter the world. And then, finally, the baby came. A daughter, small but strong. Her skin was a beautiful blend of colors. Part of her skin showed the slight bioluminescence of Zerthian genetics, but it was mixed with the darker tone of human skin. She had 4 arms, but they were shorter, more suited to a hybrid form. She had 2 eyes, like Marcus, but the eyes were large and deep, like Zerthian eyes. She was perfect. She was beautiful. She was something that had never existed before. Sarah placed the baby on Kaltara's chest, and the moment stretched and held. All the rejection, all the pain, all the words about being barren and worthless, all of it was answered by this small life. This child who was wanted. This child who was loved. This child who existed because Kaltara had chosen a different path than the one her society had told her she was supposed to follow. "She's breathing well," Sarah said, checking the infant carefully. "Strong heartbeat. All vital signs look good. You did it. You both did it." Marcus looked at his daughter, and tears came to his eyes. Humans cried when they felt deep emotion. Kaltara was learning this about them. They could not always hold their feelings inside. "She is beautiful," he said simply. Kaltara looked down at the daughter in her arms. She had no name yet. They had waited, wanting to see her first, wanting to choose a name that meant something. "Elena," Kaltara said. "I want to name her Elena." "Elena," Marcus repeated. "I like that." My grandmother was named Elena. It is a name of strength, a name of family. Word spread through the outpost quickly. A hybrid child had been born. A Zerthian human child. She was the first of her kind. Soldiers came to the medical bay to see her, to welcome her, to celebrate her arrival. A human engineer named David brought a small wooden toy that he had carved. For the baby, he said simply, handing it to Marcus. Other humans came with human gifts. A blanket. A small book about Earth. Food that was specially prepared for the new family. The outpost had become a community, and Elena was part of that community before she had even taken her first day of life. The message to Zereth was sent by Marcus, not by Kael'Tara. He wrote carefully and clearly, explaining what had happened. The child had been born healthy. She was half Zerthian and half human. She was everything that the council had said was impossible. The response came faster than expected. The council sent another message, this one different in tone. It was official and formal, but it was also something else. It was uncertain. The council did not know how to handle this situation. The child is an anomaly, they wrote. We wish to study her. We wish to understand the genetic combination. Marcus showed the message to Kael'Tara. She read it slowly. The council wanted Elena. They wanted to take her, probably to study her, probably to use her, probably to answer questions they had about breeding and genetics. No, Kael'Tara said. The word came from deep inside her. She held Elena closer, and she felt the protective instinct that humans and Zerthians seem to share across species boundaries. She is not a subject. She is not a test. She is my daughter. She is our daughter. I will send the reply, Marcus said. He typed a message and sent it back to Zereth. In the message, he made it clear. Elena was not available for study. Elena was not a curiosity. Elena was a child, and she was protected by those who loved her. 3 months after Elena's birth, Kael'Tara stood at the observation window with her daughter. Elena was sleeping against her shoulder, making small sounds that seemed to mix Zerthian and human qualities. She breathed with a rhythm that was her own. She was developing her own way of being in the world. A shuttle arrived at the outpost that day. Kael'Tara recognized it as a Zerthian vessel. She felt anxiety move through her. Had the council decided to take Elena anyway? Had they decided to override Marcus's decision? But the being who stepped out of the shuttle was not a council member. It was a Zerthian female. She was older, her skin the color of deep twilight. She carried herself with dignity, but not with the arrogance of the council. The female asked to meet with Kael'Tara. They sat together in a quiet room, Elena sleeping between them. My name is Talmyra, the female said. I am not here for the council. I am here for myself. I read about you. I read about your daughter. I heard about your refusal to be defined by your inability to breed. Kael'Tara did not know what to say. Talmyra continued, I am also barren. I have been living as an outcast in a minor settlement, working in service positions, hoping someday that someone might see that I have value beyond my genetics. When I heard about you, about what you did, about what you chose, I had to come. I had to see for myself that it was possible to build a life outside of the breeding system. Kael'Tara reached out with one of her hands. Talmyra took it. In that gesture was everything that Zereth's system had tried to deny. 2 females, both rejected, both supposedly worthless, recognizing each other's strength and value. It is possible, Kael'Tara said. It takes courage. It takes choosing something different than what your society tells you to choose. But it is possible. Talmyra stayed at the outpost for a week. She spoke with Kael'Tara about how to build a life. She looked at Elena and saw possibility instead of genetic anomaly. She returned to Zereth with stories to tell other females who had been rejected. What Kael'Tara did not know was that her story was beginning to change. Zereth from the inside. Females who had been discarded, who had been told they were worthless because they could not breed, were beginning to question, beginning to organize, beginning to demand recognition for their value beyond reproduction. A year passed. Elena grew and changed. She developed in her own unique way. She had both of her parents' strengths. She was intelligent, like both her parents. She was adaptable, moving easily between the human and Xerthian cultures of the outpost. On the day of her first birthday, Marcus and Kael'Tara held a celebration. Humans and Xerthians came together. It was not something that had happened before. Xerthians and humans did not socialize. But Elena's existence had changed that. They celebrated together, eating together, talking together, learning about each other. Looking at Elena, at the life she represented, Kael'Tara reflected on the journey. She had been rejected by her people for being barren. She had been thrown away as if she was nothing. She had been told that her life had no value, that her existence was a mistake, and then she had chosen something different. She had chosen a human captain who saw her worth. She had chosen to stay when she was offered the chance to return to her world. She had chosen love over status, partnership over breeding, and meaning over biological function. And all of that choice had led to Elena, a child who proved that everything the council had believed was wrong. A child who was the beginning of something new in the galaxy. A child who would grow up knowing that her worth was not measured by what she could produce, but by who she was. That night, after the celebration had ended, Kael'Tara sat with Elena in the observation bay. Marcus was sleeping, exhausted from the celebration. The purple sky of Xereth stretched out before them. The world that had rejected her now beginning to change because of her refusal to accept that rejection. Elena reached up with one of her small hands and touched Kael'Tara's face. The gesture was simple, but it meant everything. It meant love. It meant connection. It meant the future. Kael'Tara looked at her daughter and whispered words that no one in Xerthian society would have ever thought to say to a barren female. "I am proud of you," she whispered. "Not because of what you might become, but because you exist. Because you are alive. Because you are here. That is enough. That is everything." Elena made a small sound, something between a coo and a gentle trill. Her mother held her close and watched the stars begin to appear in the purple sky. The future stretched out before them. It was uncertain. It was unknown. But it was theirs. And that made it beautiful.